The murmur of the courtroom died away as Captain Joshua stepped forward. He stood straight, keeping his eyes fixed on the king. He did not look at Duke Marcus. When he spoke, he used the flat, steady tone of a veteran reporting back to his commander. "Your Majesty," Joshua said, his voice carrying clearly through the marble hall, "the man you call the stranger did not build a rebel army. Before he built anything, he sat down." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I watched him arrive at Dune City with nothing. No map, no plan, no orders. He did not look at the rocks first, or the water, or the high ground. He looked at us. He asked Gideon his name before he ever asked what the man could build. He asked Tobias about his hands before he asked about his crops. He sat with Rose by her fire and ate what she gave him, and he thanked her for it like a guest, not a master surveying his new property." Duke Marcus shifted in his seat, the silk of his robes hissing against the marble bench. "Captain, we did not summon you to hear a list of pleasantries. You asked for my version, my lord." Joshua said, his voice flat but unyielding. "This is it. He valued us, before he valued our labour." Somewhere behind the Duke, a noblewoman's fan stilled mid-motion. A young lord shifted his weight, the marble bench creaking faintly beneath him, the small restless discomfort of people, unused to hearing exiles described as anything other than a burden. The king's hand stilled on the arm of his throne. He said nothing. He did not need to. Only once he understood who we were, Joshua continued, did he start asking what the land could become. By the first winter, he'd shown us how to block the swamp runoff with reed and stone and farm enough fish to carry the camp through the freeze. By the fourth season, 3 stone walls held back the mountain water that used to take our tents every autumn. The first wall washed out in a flood. He didn't panic. He showed us where the footing failed, and we built it back stronger. Joshua's voice caught. Only for a moment. A single rough edge broke through the flat military cadence he had held since he entered the chamber. He took people who had given up on living, "Your Majesty," people the capital threw away, and he taught us how to build something that holds. He stopped. His jaw tightened, the only sign of how much that admission had cost a man trained never to show weakness in this room. The grand chamber stayed silent for a long moment. No one moved to fill it. The transition from the blinding glare of the summer to the treacherous grease of the autumn rains happened over weeks, marked by the slow, rhythmic shift of the desert sky. On the day Master entered Dune City, the clay pan was still baked bone dry. The heat radiated off the cracked earth in trembling waves, and warm breezes coated everything in a fine crust of salt. For those who lived at the edge of the canyon, this flat, solid surface was the only time of year that offered a small measure of freedom. Those who had difficulty moving around preferred the pan's evenness. Glib, whose twisted legs dragged uselessly behind him, could propel his torso forward with his powerful arms without sinking into the mire or hurting himself scrambling over stone. It took Master a few days to recover fully. In those days he talked to the 3 women who took care of him. It angered him that the city dumped people who did not fit their standards of beauty at the edge of the desert. He found out that Rose chose to come with Becca, and that Andrew, her husband, came every week to deliver supplies. Andrew ran an inn in the eastern part of the city called Becca's Place, to honour his daughter. Mary, Rose's sister, came to be with them because she trusted nobody else. Master tolerated Mary's suspicion of him and chose not to react to her sarcastic comments. One morning, he stood and looked out over the scattered, isolated shelters. The outcasts lived apart, their hide tents pitched as far from one another as possible. A silent architecture of shame and mutual distrust. Becca's small hand gripped his calloused fingers. "Come on," Becca said, her voice high and completely untroubled by the heavy silence of the elders. She tugged hard on his arm, the small boots crunching loudly against the salt crust. "Come meet my other friends." I told them I found a new friend. They can be your friends as well. Master did not resist. He let the child lead him directly through the invisible boundaries of the camp. Because he walked beside the little girl, the defensive walls of the outcasts failed to lock into place. They did not see an invader. They saw a tall stranger wrapped in a faded canvas jacket being managed by an 8-year-old. Becca dragged him first to a low ledge where Gideon sat. The master mason was ancient, his skin cured like boot leather, his fingers stained white from limestone dust. He was bitterly sorting through a pile of cracked shale, throwing the pieces that didn't meet his standard into the dirt with a sharp flick of his wrist. "Gideon," Becca announced, swinging Master's hand. "This is Master. He has very heavy buckles on his boots." Gideon paused. A piece of shale bounced in his scarred palm. He looked at the child, then up at the silhouette of the man standing behind her. He did not offer a greeting. Instead, he let out a rattling cough and looked back at his rocks. "Boots won't stop the salt from eating your soul, stranger," he muttered, his voice sharp with the resentment of a craftsman who no longer had anything to build. "Nothing lasts out here. The ground kills even the stone." Gideon breathed too much of the stone's dust. "Now his lungs are unhappy with him," Becca explained. Master looked down at the pile of shale, noting the clean parallel fractures in the rock. He did not offer pity or empty compliments. "It's good stone for dry stacking," Master said simply, his voice low and even. "The grain is tight. It holds an edge." Gideon's hand stilled on the rock pile. He did not look up again, but he did not throw the next stone. Becca pulled Master away, leading him toward a small hollow where Tobias sat beneath a ragged burlap awning. The farmer's sleeves were tucked tightly into his belt, hiding the ruined, crushed shape of his hands from view. Tobias looked up, his eyes wide and hollow, blinking against the glare. "Tobias grows things," Becca explained, pointing to a small withered stalk of wild chicory struggling in a cracked clay pot, even after the tax collector took his hands. Master stopped. He did not look at the hidden sleeves. He looked at the soil in the pot, reaching down with his free hand to pinch a small clump of the grey earth between his fingers. He rubbed it slowly, feeling the texture, then brought it to his nose. "Too much lime," Master murmured softly. Tobias stared at the stranger's hand, his shoulders, which had been hunched tight in anticipation of a stranger's gaze, slowly lowered. "There is no silt here. The mountain washes the good earth down before the seeds can set. It needs the dark river silt from the upper shells to balance the burn," the farmer said, his voice a thin whisper. At the far edge of the hollow, sitting alone in the deep shadow of a massive sandstone boulder, sat Captain Joshua. The veteran did not move. His empty left sleeve was pinned tightly to his blue linen tunic, and his eyes were fixed entirely on the horizon, staring through the heat mirage as if watching an army that only he could see. The air around him felt heavy. His mind felt thick with the horror of the Red Stone campaign. Becca ran to the boulder, patting the stone. "Joshua is a soldier," she said, her voice dropping into a rare, quiet reverence. "He doesn't talk much." Master walked to the edge of the shadow but did not step into it. He remained in the sunlight, looking out at the same empty horizon. He stood there for a long time, matching the soldier's silence, asking nothing, requiring nothing. Joshua did not turn his head, but his jaw muscle clenched, a sharp twitch against the tanned skin of his cheek. Over the next few weeks, Becca became Master's tour guide and introduced him to most of the scattered tents. He met the blind priest and the boy who did not look at anybody. Master also met the disfigured blacksmith and the sisters who shared a leg. Around Rosie's campfire, Mary had a judgmental opinion about all the people they visited. One day, Becca led him down to the stagnant margin of the low marsh. Here, the water from the mountain peaks collected into a wide, shallow basin before dying on the salt pan. Master stood at the marsh edge, his eyes tracking the subtle movements in the sludge. Thick shapes shifted beneath the grey surface. Master watched one of the catfish, broad-armoured, breathing air through some adaptation around its gills he didn't yet understand, as it burrowed backwards into the mud and vanished. Nearby, a reed viper coiled tight around a stalk, patient, washing the rodent nests in the roots. By the time the autumn rains arrived, the dynamic of Dune City had broken. The first thunder cracked over the high limestone peaks one morning, a low metallic rumble that shook the water in Rose's clay buckets. Within 48 hours, the mountain runoff reached the flats. The dry, solid salt pan transformed into a treacherous sheet of grey grease. The clay became slick, watery, and bottomless. Glib could no longer crawl without his chest dragging through the mire. Joshua could not find purchase for his iron brace. Master, returning from an early scouting trip with game for the pot, saw the outcasts pack up their tents and move them higher up into the gorge that led to the city. Master did not hesitate. He simply walked to Tobias's shelter, lifted the heavy poles of the tent onto his shoulders, and began carrying them up into the rocky mouth of the Iron Cleft. The rest of the camp followed, retreating to the solid sandstone shelves of the canyon where the ground remained stable. The confinement was tight and the mood was sour. To pass the rainy days, Master spent his hours working alongside Moase. The 7-foot giant was massive. His frame slumped forward as if he wished to apologize for his own size. His speech limited to soft, hesitant grunts. Together, they began clearing the heavy boulders from the center of the gorge floor, rolling them to the margins to create a smooth pathway for Glib and the others. As they worked, Master noticed that Moase did not simply drop the rocks. If left alone, the giant would carefully stack the river stones into neat spirals, sorting them by color and weight. Master stopped, watching the giant place a dark wedge of ironstone precisely atop a grey block of granite. "That's a clean line, Moase," Master said, his voice warm. "The weight distribution is perfect. It won't shift when the wind comes down the cleft." Moase froze. He looked at the stacked stones, then turned his huge head toward Master. A deep flush spread beneath his unkempt beard. He let out a shy chuckle and smiled, his wide eyes shining with an accustomed pride. Master looked down the canyon. Without realizing it, Mose's stacked stone lines and cleared boulders had begun to form the camp's first rudimentary defensive walls, closing off the narrow throat of the gorge. The next morning, Master sat on a dry stone shelf near Joshua's new shelter. He did not look at the captain. He simply started braiding a shepherd's sling from the leftover paracord in his pack and a scrap of leather he found. "My traps no longer yield enough food, Captain, and the marsh quail are nesting in the high reeds to escape the water," Master said, his tone casual and plain. "My eyes aren't accustomed to the glare off the wet stone yet. I can hit the target, but I can't find them against the grey. I need a spotter who knows how to read a ridge." Joshua looked down at the shepherd's sling. His only hand twitched, an old military reflex, the dormant need to be useful to another man in the field, pulled at his spine. He reached down, gripped his old spear shaft without its spearhead, and stood up. He did not speak, but he stepped out into the drizzle alongside Master. For 3 days they hunted the margins of the swollen marsh. Joshua's sharp eyes tracked the movement of the fat rodents and the sudden flush of the quail. Master's shepherd's sling took them down with mechanical efficiency. When Master missed a shot, Joshua suggested corrections in stance or grip. They returned to the gorge each evening with enough meat to fill Rose's large communal cooking pot. On the 4th night, the constant drizzle stopped. The entire community gathered under the makeshift lean-to that covered the central fire pit where Rose's stew bubbled. The warmth of the food did little to clear the air. The outcasts sat in their usual defensive postures, their voices rising in a familiar rhythmic chorus of self-pity and complaint. "The damp is getting into my hip," Glib spat, leaning back against the rock wall. "We're just huddling in a different ditch while the king's tax collectors count their coin in the dry. The salt will be twice as thick when this water dries," Mary muttered, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "We're just waiting for the freeze to finish us off. There's no point in moving these tents." Master stood up from his seat near the woodpile, the firelight catching the rough canvas of his jacket. "You think this cold is hard?" Master asked, his voice cutting through the murmuring. "You should have seen the first men who discovered fire. They didn't have Rose to cook for them. They didn't even know what fire was." The camp went quiet, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. One day, a lightning bolt hit an old juva tree, Master said, his eyes scanning the faces of the outcasts. It was burning bright. The first caveman walked up to it, curious. He didn't know the rules. He reached out and grabbed a glowing red branch with his bare hand. Master suddenly leapt backwards, his face twisting into a mask of pure, exaggerated shock. He gripped his own right hand, blowing furiously on his fingers with loud, frantic gasp. "Phew, phew, phew, phew." Becca burst into a sudden high-pitched giggle. The second caveman saw him jumping. Master continued, completely abandoning his dignified posture as he lunged to the other side of the fire. He ran over to help, but he didn't look down. He stepped with his bare sole right onto a burning chunk of coal that had fallen into the grass. Master kicked his leg into the air, spinning around on his heel, his face turning to the roof of the lean-to as he let out a loud, ridiculous roar. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" lifting his foot and began hopping frantically around the fire pit on one leg. He spent the next 2 minutes jumping from side to side, balancing on one heel, blowing on his fingers, and combining the noises as he mimicked the two ancient men trying to explain the disaster to their tribe. Phew, ah, phew, ah. And that is where the word fire came from. The absurdity was absolute. This mysterious stranger who had fallen out of the sky was currently dancing like a camel on its hind legs in the dirt. Glib tried to hold his sneer, but a sharp snicker escaped his nose. Gideon's mouth twitched, and then Rose let out a booming laugh that echoed off the sandstone. Within moments the entire canyon was filled with the roar of shared amusement. Becca was rolling on the hide mat. Even Captain Joshua was leaning back against his boulder, his shoulders shaking with a genuine smile. The suffocating layer of self-pity that had held Dune City for so long dissolved in the smoke of the fire. They had learned the primary rule of the Gorge: do not take yourself too seriously. The humour acted as an emotional solvent. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere inside the Iron Cleft shifted entirely. The campfire was no longer a place for complaints. It became an arena for storytelling. The Outcasts began competing to share the most ridiculous mistakes of their past lives, using laughter to disarm their old shame. Malachi, the blind priest, stepped out of his rigid, orthodox composure. He did not offer the formal prayers of the capital's temples. Instead, his voice dropped into a rich melodic cadence. He told a humorous and beautiful folktale of two clumsy star-crossed lovers from the old empire, who tried to escape a local governor by transforming themselves into birds, only to discover they had turned into a pair of fat mismatched doves, who spent the rest of their days bickering over breadcrumbs on the temple steps. As the night grew colder, Master noticed a profound transformation in the layout of the settlement. The Outcasts no longer pitched their shelters in isolation. Day by day, without any direct order being given, they quietly dragged their hide tents closer together, organizing them into a tight crescent, orbiting the main campfire. They were no longer a collection of separate exiles waiting for the winter to claim them. They had become a village. While moving one of the tents, Gideon and Tobias misunderstood each other and dropped some of the heavy poles onto some empty water buckets. Everybody jumped at the unexpected clatter. Master noticed Mary standing near the rocks. Her hands were shaking violently, her fingers white as she gripped the handle of an empty bucket. Master walked over, standing beside her without crowding her space. "Are you all right, Mary?" he asked gently. Mary shook her head. She looked down at her white knuckles, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. "It isn't the noise," she whispered, her voice trembling with a raw terror. She looked up at Master, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm so tired of being afraid." She stepped closer to the stone wall, her voice dropping so the others wouldn't hear. "My sharpness, Master, the things I say to Rose, the way I bite at Glib, it isn't because I hate them. It's my shield. I wake up every morning waiting for the winter freeze to kill our wood supply. I wait for the King's scout to come down the ridge and drive us into the salt. If I expect the worst every single minute, then it doesn't hurt as much when the blow falls. My harshness is the only thing that keeps me from running away screaming." Master listened in silence, his posture relaxed, his shadow shielding her from the rest of the camp's view. He did not tell her to be strong. He did not offer cheap advice. "That is a very heavy armor to carry every day, Mary," he said softly, his voice filled with validating calm. "It takes a lot of strength to keep a shield up for that long, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore. The wall Moase is building at the throat of the gorge. That's for your tent too." Mary let out a long, ragged breath. Her fingers slowly uncoiled from the bucket handle. She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped 3 inches, the chronic anxiety easing its grip a bit for the first time in years. As the freezing winter finally locked the desert in frost, it turned the grey clay pan solid as stone, before the sun thawed it into a slippery mess. Master decided to stretch the community out of their comfort zone. The emotional baseline of the camp had shifted from despair to collective confidence. They were ready for the next step. One evening around the campfire he presented the problem. "The water from the mountains is leaving us too fast," Master explained, looking at everybody in the group. "The winter frost will drive the mudstalkers under the surface, and they only come back with the spring thaw. Is there not a way to hold the water here? This way we can keep on fishing during the whole year. Malachi spoke first. My father and I, we wove the crescent fences in the eastern estuaries when I was a boy, the priest said, his voice carrying a clean authority. If you guide the water into a circle, the fish will follow the current. They will swim through a funnel gate looking for the deep mud, but they cannot find their way back out if the reeds are angled inward. We'll need walls to hold the perimeter first, Gideon said. His eyes narrowed as he studied the sandstone shells above the marsh. He pointed a scarred finger toward the ridge. The shell up there is perfect for a low containment tier. No mortar needed if we interlock the joints. And the gaps in the reeds must be exactly 2 inches apart, Tobias added, lifting his hidden sleeves to indicate a measurement with his forearms. That lets the small fry slip through back to the open water. We don't harvest the breeding stocks or the pool dies by summer. For 2 weeks the Outcasts worked as a single machine, under Gideon's direction. Master cut the stones. Moase hauled the heavy slabs. Tobias used his knowledge of friction and weight to balance the blocks. Malachi sat by the fire, his fingers moving with incredible speed as he taught Becca and Mary how to weave the split juniper reeds into the traditional Uchwaye fish kraals. When the freeze hit its peak in the heart of winter, and the wild game disappeared from the ridges, the village did not starve. Master stood with Glib at the edge of the newly completed stone containment basins. Glib held the ledger slate, his sharp mind tracking the numbers as Rose lifted the first woven basket from the circular funnel traps. The basket emerged dripping with water filled with massive mud stalkers, their dark scales glistening in the winter sun. Glib looked down at his slate, then up at the village gathered around the pool. For the first time his cynical sneer was entirely gone. That's enough to feed us for a week, he exclaimed, his voice steady and clear. We did it. Master noticed how everybody stood straighter. They had not survived because of a royal handout or charity from the capital. They had survived because of their own collective intelligence. Their self-pity was dead, replaced by deeper self-confidence. Over the next 3 years, that confidence grew into a permanent monument. By the following spring, Tobias had designed a heavy timber scraper plough, its iron blade forged from scrap metal which Andrew brought from the city. Moase proudly stepped into the thick leather harness, his giant frame leaning forward with immense power as he scraped the heavy clay out of the upper mountain ravine. To clear the foundations for a retainer dam, Glib sat on a high rock above him, shouting down the exact coordinates to guide the giant's path. The project faced its ultimate trial during the second wet season. A massive flash flood roared down from the mountain peaks overnight. The volume of water was terrifying. The immorted retainer wall was completely undermined by the mass of water and violently swept away, leaving nothing but a field of scattered stone in the mud. The next morning, the camp stood at the edge of the breach, the cold rain dripping from their hoods. Glib looked down at his ruined ledger, his mouth tightening as if he were ready to retreat into his old protective bitterness. I told you, he whispered. The mountain always wins. Master stepped into the center of the mud, his face hidden as he looked at the broken footings. He did not look disappointed. He reached down, picked up a smooth fragment of the broken wall and turned to Gideon. Look at the break, Master said, his voice entirely devoid of panic or regret. The stone didn't crack. The foundation gave way because the water got beneath a clay shelf. This isn't a failure, Glib. This is data. The mountain just showed us exactly where the bedrock sinks. He turned back to the villagers, his tone turning into an infectious challenge. We know the weight of the water now. We know where the shelf shifts. We reset the footing 6 feet deeper into the sandstone, anchor the corners, and we build it back stronger. Gideon looked at the bedrock, his mason's eye catching the logic of the correction. He wiped the rain from his face and gripped his chisel. He's right, the builder muttered. We didn't anchor the eastern wing deep enough. Bring the levers. They did not quit. They rebuilt the second dam, anchoring its roots deep into the sandstone of the canyon floor. When the next seasonal torrents hit, the wall did not move. It held the mountain water back, creating a deep, clean reservoir of fresh water. Emboldened by their own success, they spent the third season building a second interlocking tier higher up the ravine. By the fourth season, 3 massive stone step dams stood aligned in the canyon that fed the marshes. Taming the wild mountain waters reduced the silt variance to 0, and gave them enough water to last throughout the hot summer months. One afternoon, Master hiked up the narrow trail they built to get to the highest dam. He wanted to see if they could use the dry side of the dam wall to plant fruit trees. Andrew said he would be able to get fig, olive and pomegranate saplings. The roots of the trees would add further strength to the dam wall. As the sun set, he noticed the distant peaks became choked by an unnatural storm. Master sat alone on a cold boulder at the highest point of the cliff, looking down at the small crescent of campfires burning in the throat of the Iron Cleft. In his hand he held his steel staff. The small crystal fragment embedded in the heavy cap did not reflect the twilight. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic violet light that matched the strange, bruised colour of the clouds gathered over the peaks. The metal shaft hummed against his palm, the vibration that radiated straight up his arm and settled as a dull ache behind his eyes. The internal weight became too heavy to carry in silence. Master closed his eyes, breathed slowly and deepened until the wind of the ridge faded, shifting his consciousness downward into the quiet council chamber of his own mind. "Why is the staff humming strangely?" Master asked, his internal voice carefully neutral. "I thought it was only I who could come into this world, but this reminds me of meeting Malika in the void." From the shadows of his mind the 4 dragon souls emerged. "You are right," Syrinx responded. "It is Malika pressing against the boundary of this world, but he cannot enter this world." "That is not entirely true, Syrinx," Warmer cut in. "He is still out there, blind but searching, feeling for the unique energetic footprint of our pods, and another weak place in this world's membrane. We are not the only ones with the technology to cut open the membrane." "But why is he still looking?" Master wanted to know. "Did he not get to rule over your world once you left?" "Because he is weak and vengeful," Becca rumbled, his warrior presence tasting like iron and ash. "He knows we are still alive and prefers us dead. And because we are still alive, we have a martyr status in our world," Kia added. Orma opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. "Orma," Kia's voice was careful, giving him room. "Is there something else?" He said nothing. The silence stretched a beat too long. Syrinx's tone sharpened into the older sister register Master had learned to recognize. "Orma, what are you not telling us?" "I did not follow the evacuation protocol." "Not exactly." Orma's voice was steady, but he had stopped looking at any of them. He looked at the staff in Master's hand. "We launched the pods from the Sidrin High Temple. It has the oldest gate to the void, the safest crossing point we had left. That the temple held something else." He stopped. "Orma." Kia's warmth had gone out of her voice entirely. "What was in the temple?" "Silence. The kind that has weight." "The Sacred Heart," Orma said. Nobody spoke. Master felt the quiet pressing in from 4 directions at once. Not empty silence, but 4 minds going very still in the same instant. "Say you left it," Syrinx said quietly. "Say it burned with the temple, Orma. Say anything but." "I carried it with me, in a jump." The reaction did not come as noise. It came as pressure. Master felt it behind his eyes, in his teeth, the way the cave fever had felt when Syrinx first arrived. 4 ancient minds recoiling at once. The sovereign engine. Syrinx's voice had dropped to something Master had never heard from her. Not anger. Not yet. Disbelief. The engine our entire civilization was built on. You took it. Like a thief. "Yes." "Do you understand what you have done?" Vaga's voice came low, which was worse than the raw Master expected. "We let the council believe it was ash. We let our people believe Marker could never rebuild on our bones. You let them believe a lie, and you let us believe it too." "I know." "Then why?" Kia's question was the gentlest and it cut the deepest. Orma was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone had to carry it, and dead is not a guardian. I judged the odds, and I judged this host." A pause. "I have run those numbers 10,000 times since. I have never found a way to tell you that did not end in this exact silence, so I told no one. I am telling you now because he is starting to feel it, and he deserves to know what he carries before it gets him killed." Master had gone very still. "I'm carrying something that can rebuild the civilization, or end one." "Yes," Orma said. "The crystal in your staff cap holds the regulator. The lining in your jacket holds the rest. I built the containment into your gear. And I told none of you, because the few minds that held the truth, the few ways it could leak. Something cold moved through Master's chest, not his own fear. He realized a memory surfacing from one of theirs. He is not whole, almost said quietly before Master could ask. Malaka cannot build, he can only take, and the taking is never enough. Every world he claims rots under him within a generation because he has nothing to hold it together. He has watched empire after empire turn to dust in his hands. He needs the heart the way a starving man needs food he can no longer remember the taste of. And he is close, Kyo added, her voice quieter than before. The purple in the clouds is not a warning, it is him, scraping at the membrane, closer with every season. He cannot smell the heart directly, not yet, but he can smell you, Master. Every time you build, every time you fix something broken, the heart answers without meaning to, a frequency it cannot help but sing, and he is listening. He will not stop, Vagus said. He has never stopped, not for a void crossing, not for 1,000 years, not for anything less than the thing he is owed. That's why he's hunting, Master said slowly, understanding arriving like a struck nerve. He's not hunting me, he's hunting this. He is hunting both, Kyo said. He cannot tell the difference yet, but he will. Master looked down at the staff in his hand, the same staff he had built with his own fingers in a cave. Believing it was just steel and a piece of pretty shell, he thought of Mary's tent, finally quiet after years of nightmares. He thought of Mose's stone lines, holding back a mountain. He thought of the fire that had taught an entire camp how to laugh again. All of it, sitting in his hand the whole time, 12 feet from people who had no idea what slept beside their fire. And Malaka was not a storm that would simply pass overhead. He would come for the staff the way he came for everything, by destroying whatever stood between him and it first. The canyon, the fire, the people who had finally stopped flinching when he raised his voice. We cannot stay, Master said. Not a question, not even really a decision, more like something that had already decided itself the moment he understood. He stood. The wind cut through the canvas jacket. The jacket, he now understood, that was doing more than keeping him warm. The staff struck the sandstone as he turned to start down the ridge. That was when he saw it, a flicker of firelight in the middle of the desert, where no fire should be.